They let me go 4 days before my pension kicked in, but I knew what to do. Narrated by Evelyn Monroe. How long have you been with us, Evelyn? 30 years, isn't it? Richard Coleman leaned back in his sleek office chair, voice smooth but distant. 30 years and 361 days, I replied, keeping my tone steady even as my eyes landed on the manila envelope on his glass desk. In all my time at Fairmount Aerospace, I'd never been summoned to the executive floor in Houston on a Thursday afternoon. Something was off. I'm Evelyn Monroe, 62 years old, and until 10 minutes ago, I was the lead compliance analyst at one of the top defense contractors in Texas. I've spent 3 decades keeping Fairmount within federal regulations, catching oversights, flagging anomalies, and holding the line when others wanted shortcuts. My pension was set to fully vest on Monday, just 4 days away. Richard pushed the folder toward me with clinical precision. Due to restructuring, your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. Restructuring? Just last week, Fairmount announced a $3.1 billion defense contract renewal. The excuse didn't track. This is your severance package, he added, tapping the folder. It must be signed by end of business tomorrow. Otherwise, the offer is rescinded. HR will assist you in clearing your workspace. I didn't respond with outrage. I didn't cry. I'd seen enough internal memos to know exactly what this was. Calculated, cold, timed to deny me everything I'd worked for. Thank you for the opportunity, I said softly, lifting the folder without glancing inside. Richard looked confused, like he expected me to fall apart. But I've built a career recognizing patterns, and this one couldn't be clearer. I rose, smoothed my blazer, and left with my dignity untouched. In my office, Carol from HR stood awkwardly as I packed. The framed photo of my late husband, Mason, the ceramic cactus my son gave me when he left for college, the service award from my 20th year. I didn't need much. What mattered didn't belong in a cardboard box. I'm so sorry, Evelyn, Carol whispered, eyes darting toward the security officer by the elevator. This doesn't feel right. It is what it is, I replied aloud. But inside? I knew better, and I already knew who to call. This wasn't just unethical, it was potentially illegal. For the past 4 years, I had been carefully documenting financial inconsistencies at Fairmount Aerospace, patterns that intensified the moment Richard Coleman became CEO. If this story moved you, even just a little, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Not out of obligation, but because stories like this deserve to be heard, and voices like ours deserve to be remembered. There's more ahead, more stories of resilience, courage, and quiet victories against impossible odds. If you've ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or silenced, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and join us for the next chapter, because sometimes the ending isn't where the story stops. It's where the real transformation begins. I'd filed formal memos, flagged discrepancies in quarterly reports, and even presented evidence of backdated certifications. Every warning had been ignored, buried, or deflected with instructions to prioritize alignment with business goals. I walked through the lobby one last time, the familiar marble floor suddenly foreign beneath my feet. Have a good evening, Mrs. Monroe, the security guard mumbled, clearly uneasy about escorting me out. I intend to, I replied, nodding as I stepped into the humid Houston air. The drive home was a blur. 30 years reduced to a severance folder and a cardboard box. Early spring rain dotted my windshield as I passed landmarks from a life built around this city. Our old church where Mason and I had married. The park where my son learned to ride his bike. The quiet street where I'd lived alone since Mason passed away 10 years ago. I thought about the sacrifices I'd made for Fairmount. Late nights reviewing audits, canceled vacations, missed holidays. I did it all believing my pension would protect my future. I pulled into the driveway and sat still, feeling the weight settle in. Richard had only been with the company 7 months. He came with a reputation for efficiency, which was often code for ruthless cost cutting. I'd refused to sign off on his latest policy, one that manipulated supplier certifications and violated aerospace compliance standards. I expected resistance. I didn't expect to be terminated days before my retirement benefits vested. Inside, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table, finally opening the severance envelope. It was insulting. 3 months' pay in exchange for signing away all legal claims. No pension, no health coverage, no acknowledgement of 30 years. They assumed fear would push me to sign fast, alone, and quietly. But I wasn't alone, and I wasn't unprepared. I walked to my home office and opened the fireproof lockbox hidden behind photo albums. My safety net. For years, I'd collected copies of internal audits, email chains, and signed approvals that pointed to deeper fraud. I hadn't planned to use them until now. But some instincts shouldn't be ignored. It wasn't just suspicious, it was a pattern. I opened the lockbox and reviewed its contents. Loan applications with fabricated numbers, quarterly statements showing inflated revenue, emails ordering staff to retroactively approve safety inspections that had never taken place. Over 1,000 pages of internal misconduct. I'd reported every piece through official channels, and every time it had been ignored or redirected. I scrolled through my phone until I found a name I hadn't seen in years: Marcus Bell. Marcus had once served as Fairmount Aerospace's chief financial officer before moving to the Securities and Exchange Commission. He respected precision. Even when others found my thoroughness annoying, Marcus had called it indispensable. It's time, I thought, pressing call. That night, Marcus and I spoke for nearly 2 hours. I laid out the timeline, the emails, the reports, the severance offer, everything. His response was careful but firm. This isn't just a termination, Evelyn. It's a cover-up. And the pension timing? That's not a coincidence. It's a red flag. He explained the SEC's whistleblower protections and scheduled a meeting for Monday morning. Don't sign anything, he warned, and secure those documents. You've done your part. Now let us do ours. By Saturday morning, I was working with mechanical focus. I organized the evidence by date, labeled each section, and created 3 identical binders. One for the SEC, one for my lawyer, and one for safekeeping. Each page felt heavier than paper. It was history, betrayal, and proof. Calls came all day. Carol from HR. Richard Coleman himself. Even the company's legal counsel. I let every call go to voicemail. Evelyn, we really need those forms signed today. Richard's voice crackled through my phone, edged with urgency. I can stop by if that makes it easier. Then the legal team chimed in. Ms. Monroe, failing to return your signed agreement could jeopardize your severance package. Their panic confirmed everything. They didn't want peace. They wanted silence. At 4:30 p.m., my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Richard on my porch, his tailored suit out of place in my quiet Houston neighborhood. Evelyn, I know you're in there, he called. Let's be reasonable. Just sign the documents. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some things are better answered in court. Just sign the papers, and we can all move on. Richard's voice rang through the door like a bad echo. I waited until his luxury sedan pulled away from the curb before opening the front door. In my mailbox sat another envelope, identical to the first. This one scrawled with a note, "Final opportunity." Signed by 9 a.m., Monday. That night, my daughter Natalie called for our usual Sunday check-in. She lives in Denver now with her husband and 2 boys. Mom, what's going on? You sound off. I thought about softening it, but she deserved honesty. I was let go on Friday. What? But your pension? In 4 days, I said calmly. They did it anyway. Do you need me to come home? I can be on a flight tomorrow. No, honey. I've got this under control. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my living room, the ceiling fan humming overhead. For decades, I'd believed in process, in professionalism, in doing things the right way. And when things got hard, I doubled down. But Fairmount made its decision. Now I would make mine. I wasn't signing anything. I wasn't going away quietly, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let them erase 30 years without a fight. Monday morning brought with it a stillness I hadn't felt in years. I dressed carefully, navy blue suit, hair neatly pulled back, heels that still made a statement. I placed my documents into a locked briefcase and drove toward downtown Houston. The SEC's regional office was glass and steel, understated yet serious. Marcus Bell met me in the lobby. Time had added lines to his face but not dulled his eyes. "Evelyn," he said, shaking my hand. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Good to see you, Marcus, and thank you for believing this matters." He led me to a conference room where two professionals waited: Tanya Rhodes, a senior enforcement attorney, and David Lynn, a forensic accountant. They greeted me with polite warmth. "Ms. Monroe," Tanya began, "before we proceed, I need to confirm you understand that by sharing this information, we begin an official investigation. There's no reversing course." "I understand completely," I replied. I opened the briefcase. It was time. I nodded. "I understand completely." For the next 3 hours, I walked them through the documentation, step by step. It started 4 years ago. Shipping logs that didn't match invoices, followed by quality control records mysteriously signed off days after products had already been delivered. Then came the manipulated revenue numbers, small at first, then bold. After Richard Coleman took over, the pace of deception accelerated. David Lynn, the forensic accountant, leaned forward. "These discrepancies aren't minor," he said gravely. "Fairmount's been overstating revenue by at least 18% over the last 2 fiscal years. This is classic securities fraud." Tanya Rhodes, the lead enforcement attorney, asked, "And you reported these issues internally?" "Multiple times," I replied, handing them printed memos, emails, and chain-of-command documentation. Each report was either dismissed, ignored, or redirected. Once Richard took charge, everything was funneled through his office, then vanished. Marcus looked at me. "And you believe your termination was tied to this?" "Without question. They fired me 4 days before my pension vested. But more than that, I had just flagged major violations in Richard's new cost-cutting plan. He needed me out before I could escalate." As the meeting wrapped up, Tanya outlined next steps. "We'll need your sworn statement. The investigation will remain confidential for now, but based on what you've provided, we may need to act quickly." "How long will it take?" I asked. "It varies," she replied, "but this case has serious traction." I wasn't even home yet when my phone rang. It was Carol from HR, voice trembling. "Evelyn, something's happening. The board called an emergency meeting this morning. Richard's locked in his office. There's talk that SEC investigators have contacted our legal team." "So it's begun," I said calmly. "Evelyn, did you report something?" I paused. "I did what I should have done a long time ago." "And your pension paperwork?" she asked. "That's why I'm calling. They've frozen your termination. Everything's under review." An hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was Thomas Everett, chairman of the board, a man who had barely spoken to me in 3 decades. "Ms. Monroe," he began, voice unusually tight. "We need to speak. As soon as possible. We seem to have a situation that requires your input," Thomas Everett said carefully. "Would you be willing to come into the office tomorrow to discuss matters?" "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mr. Everett. I replied evenly. Any discussions moving forward should involve my attorney and possibly representatives from the Securities and Exchange Commission. I'm sure you understand. The silence on the line stretched longer than expected. Finally, he cleared his throat. I see. Perhaps we can arrange something more formal, then. As I ended the call, I felt no triumph, just exhaustion. I'd never set out to be a whistleblower. All I ever wanted was to do my job right and retire with the security I'd earned. But Fairmount forced my hand. Now we all had to live with the consequences. My phone didn't stop ringing that evening. Former co-workers, anxious executives, legal aides, everyone wanted to talk. I answered none of them. The time for backroom whispers had passed. By Wednesday morning, the story broke wide open. Houston Business Chronicle ran the headline, SEC investigates Fairmount Aerospace amid allegations of fraud and retaliation. The company's stock dropped 22% by mid-afternoon. Analysts who once praised Richard Coleman's lean leadership style now questioned whether any of the company's reported growth had been real. That afternoon, a certified letter arrived from Fairmount's legal department. My termination was officially rescinded. I was now on administrative leave with full benefits, pending further internal review. A flimsy gesture, far too late. At 10 a.m. the next day, I walked into Fairmount headquarters with my attorney, Barbara Reynolds. No relation, but we'd shared a laugh about the name. The same security guard who had escorted me out just 5 days earlier gave a respectful nod as we passed. Inside, employees paused their hushed conversations as we walked through the lobby. In the boardroom, Thomas Everett sat with outside counsel and 3 other board members. Richard Coleman was nowhere in sight. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Monroe," Everett said, looking visibly older than he had a week earlier. "We've initiated a full internal investigation based on your documentation." Barbara cut in before I could respond. "Let's be absolutely clear, Mr. Everett. Ms. Monroe did not raise these issues after her termination. She's been reporting them for years. Your failure to act, and her termination just before her pension vested, speaks volumes." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, well, that's part of what we're now investigating. We consider Ms. Monroe an employee in good standing, with all benefits fully intact," Thomas Everett said. "Including my pension?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Of course," he replied quickly, almost too quickly. "In fact, we're prepared to offer you a consulting role post-retirement. You could begin immediately if you choose. Your expertise is invaluable and—" "My client won't be making any decisions today," Barbara cut in. "And any talk of future arrangements will require full disclosure about how her prior concerns were ignored or suppressed." The meeting dragged on for another hour. The board members scrambled to shift blame, mostly toward Richard Coleman, and claimed they'd been misled or kept in the dark. Their sudden concern for ethics was hard to take seriously. I let Barbara do most of the talking. I watched their expressions, their body language. These were the same people I'd passed in hallways for 30 years, people who barely registered my existence. Now they couldn't avoid me. Now they were forced to see me. As we gathered our things, Everett made one last appeal. "Evelyn, we're hoping you'll share with the SEC that we're taking corrective steps. Your cooperation would be very helpful." I looked him square in the eye. "Mr. Everett, I spent 30 years in this company's compliance division. During that time, I filed 47 major reports documenting misconduct. I sent 16 memos on the very issues now under investigation. I requested 9 meetings with senior leadership. Only 2 were granted, and neither led to action." I paused. "At what point in that record did I ever have your support?" Silence. The kind that lands like a weight. "I'll fully cooperate with the SEC and with your internal investigation," I added. "But I'll speak only to the facts. Whether those facts help or hurt Fairmount will depend on what you do next, not what's said in this room." As Barbara and I walked out, she whispered, "That was beautifully said." Outside in the parking lot, I finally exhaled. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving me exhausted but sharp. "This isn't victory," I said aloud. "Not yet." "No," Barbara agreed, "but it's the beginning of accountability. And make no mistake, they're scared of you." I shook my head. "They're not afraid of me. They're afraid of the truth." Barbara smiled. "Exactly. And that's why you're going to win." As I drove home, I found myself thinking of Mason, my late husband. He always said my eye for detail wasn't a flaw, no matter how many people rolled their eyes at my thoroughness. "Your attention to detail isn't a quirk, Evelyn," he'd remind me. "It's a superpower." Maybe he was right all along. By Friday, 1 week to the day after my termination, the story had exploded into a full-scale corporate scandal. The SEC had formally requested records from Fairmount Aerospace, and an internal memo from Thomas Everett confirmed Richard Coleman's suspension pending investigation. Fairmount's stock plummeted nearly 30%, shaking investor confidence and raising red flags for defense contract auditors. I was no longer just Evelyn Monroe, the overlooked compliance officer. Business publications now called me the whistleblower who exposed Fairmount. The attention was uncomfortable, but I stayed focused, working closely with the SEC team now stationed in a satellite office not far from Fairmount headquarters. The documents I'd submitted had cracked the case open, but what they were uncovering went far deeper. Marcus Bell called me Friday afternoon. "Evelyn, it's worse than we thought," he said, his voice steady but grim. "The financial manipulation predates Coleman by at least 5 years. He didn't start it, but he definitely accelerated it." "I suspected that," I replied. "There were reports I never had access to, executive-level summaries kept out of compliance files." "Well, we have them now," Marcus continued. "It's systemic. Fabricated growth, misleading investor statements, even altered inventory valuations. At least 3 board members signed off. They're denying knowledge, but the trail's clear." It should have felt like vindication, but instead I felt hollow. I'd given this company my life, and it was far more compromised than I'd ever known. People I'd once trusted had been complicit all along. That evening, Natalie called. Her voice was tight with anger. "Mom, have you seen the news?" "No," I admitted. "I've been staying away from the media." "Why?" "Richard gave an interview. Said you had performance issues. That you were bitter about being passed over for promotions. He's trying to make it sound like this is personal revenge." I wasn't surprised. It was textbook damage control. Discredit the messenger to deflect from the message. "It doesn't matter," I told her. "The truth is bigger than their narrative." "The evidence speaks for itself," I told Natalie. "My reviews have been flawless for 30 years. They can't rewrite that history now." But Richard Coleman was certainly trying. That evening, multiple news outlets picked up his version of events, implying that I had doctored documents, that I was acting out of bitterness. It was desperate. And it hurt to see my name dragged like that after a lifetime of integrity. Barbara called the moment the stories hit. "Don't respond," she said firmly. "The SEC will issue a statement tomorrow confirming your whistleblower status and the validity of your documentation. Let the official process do the work." "I won't respond publicly," I said, "but there is something I need to do." The next morning, I went to my neighborhood bank in Midtown Houston and asked to speak with Tracy Ferguson, the branch manager. I'd known her for years. She'd handled Fairmount's local banking for as long as I could remember. "Evelyn," she greeted me warmly. "I've seen the headlines. How are you holding up?" "I'm okay, but I need access to my safe deposit box." In the privacy of the vault, I unlocked the box and pulled out a sealed envelope I'd tucked away 3 years ago. Inside were email exchanges I'd accidentally discovered between Richard's predecessor and 2 board members, discussing how to manipulate financial statements during a major acquisition window. I hadn't submitted them to the SEC initially, as they didn't directly tie to Richard. But now, with Richard attacking my credibility, they provided crucial context. This wasn't just one CEO's scheme, it was a culture. I called Marcus Bell immediately. I've got something that shifts the timeline and the blame. I'm bringing it to you now. As I drove to meet him, I didn't feel triumphant, just certain. The full truth was bigger than any single name. That Monday, 10 days after my termination and a week into the investigation, Fairmount's board held an emergency session. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. Marcus called from outside the room. "It's chaos," he said. "The SEC just dropped the preliminary report. 3 board members resigned on the spot. Richard's trying to say he just followed existing practices, but no one's buying it now." By noon, Fairmount issued a public statement announcing leadership restructuring and full cooperation with federal authorities. The company's press release confirmed the resignation of 4 board members and the official termination of Richard Coleman for cause. Fairmount Aerospace's stock, already in free fall, tumbled another 12% that afternoon. Around 3 p.m., my phone rang again. It was Carol from HR. "Evelyn, the interim CEO would like to meet with you. Tomorrow, if possible." The interim CEO was Patricia Donovan, formerly the company's chief operating officer. She had always been professional, never warm, but never unkind. I agreed to the meeting on one condition. It would take place at Barbara's law office. Patricia arrived the next day looking worn down but composed. She wasted no time. "Evelyn," she said, "I won't offer small talk. The company's in crisis, and you're at the center of it. Not because you caused the damage, but because you were the only one who refused to look away." She slid a folder across the table. It looked eerily similar to the one I'd received just 11 days earlier, but this one came with a very different message. "This document officially rescinds your termination," she said. "Your employment is reinstated retroactively, and your pension is fully vested. It also includes a compensation package to recognize the hardship you've endured." I opened it. 5 years of salary, lifetime health care, a formal apology from the board. "We're also creating a new division, corporate ethics and accountability. We'd like you to help design it. As a consultant, post-retirement." I didn't answer. Not yet. "And Richard, the board members who signed off on the fraud?" I asked. Her face hardened. "Criminal charges are coming. The company won't protect them." Justice, it seemed, had arrived. Late, but unmistakable. 6 months later, I sat quietly in a federal courtroom in downtown Houston, watching as Richard Coleman and 2 former board members entered guilty pleas to securities fraud. The man who had once ended my career without flinching now looked hollow in his Navy suit. Our eyes met, briefly. He didn't see Evelyn Monroe, the compliance officer. He saw the consequences of his actions personified. The Fairmount scandal became a national case study in corporate governance and the power of internal controls. I declined the consulting role, choosing instead to work with federal regulators on improved whistleblower protocols. The SEC awarded me 15% of the penalties recovered. Combined with my pension and settlement, I had more financial stability than I'd ever imagined. I used part of the settlement to establish a scholarship fund for women pursuing careers in corporate ethics and compliance. I named it after Mason, who always believed integrity mattered more than recognition. Natalie had relocated back to Houston to be closer to me, bringing my 2 grandchildren with her. We spent our weekends at my new home along Lake Conroe, making up for the years I'd spent working late, chasing audits and paperwork while family moments slipped past. One evening, as we watched the sunset paint the water gold, Natalie turned to me. "Mom, do you regret staying at Fairmount all those years, given how it ended?" I thought for a long moment. Then I answered honestly. Number, I regret that exposing them became necessary, but I don't regret the work I did there. I looked out over the water, the reflection calm and still. Integrity isn't about doing the right thing when it's easy. It's doing it when it's hard, when it costs you something. Natalie nodded. You taught me that, not with lectures, with how you lived. In that moment, I realized that the most meaningful outcome wasn't the public vindication or the financial security. It was this: the quiet proof that my choices had shown my daughter what it meant to live by your values, no matter the price. As for Fairmount Aerospace, the company survived, but in a smaller, more humbled form. The new leadership installed strict compliance measures and transparent reporting systems. I still received their annual reports, maybe out of respect, maybe out of guilt. I read them carefully. The changes were real, and that gave me a sense of peace. Some might frame my story as one of revenge, but I've never seen it that way. I didn't retaliate. I didn't burn it all down out of anger. I simply did what I had always done. I documented the facts, I reported the truth, and I stood by my findings. The only difference this time was that people were finally forced to listen. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. It means more than I can say. What happened at Fairmount wasn't just about me losing a job. It was about refusing to let silence protect the powerful at the expense of the truth. And if my journey resonated with you, I hope you'll leave a comment below. Tell me what part stayed with you. What would you have done in my shoes? Or maybe you've faced something similar. Your voice matters too. I didn't stand up because I was fearless. I stood up because doing nothing would have meant betraying the very values I built my life around. It took decades of working in the background before someone finally listened. If you believe in that kind of quiet strength, if you've lived it or seen it in someone you love, support this channel. Share this story. Let others know they're not alone. And here's my advice: never let someone else define your worth. Not a boss, not a title, not a paycheck. You carry your integrity with you through every setback, every win, and every injustice. Guard it, nurture it, because when the moment comes, and it will, you'll need it to stand tall. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like mine. And if you've ever felt like your work went unseen, I hope this reminded you it's never too late to be heard.